Before we start, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you won't miss any new videos. Fact 1. Megacities of Antiquity. The mystery of the Trypillia Cucutini culture. During the Neolithic period, ca 5400 to 2700 BC, when most of Europe was covered by primitive forests, a civilization flourished on the right bank of present-day Ukraine that is now often called the First Europe. Giant Trypillian settlements, such as Talyanki and Maidanetsk, covered up to 450 hectares. For comparison, the legendary Jericho was dozens of times smaller. The Trypillians built their homes in concentric circles, creating a system of radial streets that allowed for rapid movement of resources and organized defense. Their houses were two-story structures. The ground floor served as a livestock shelter and storage area, while the upper floor was used for living, complete with clay ovens and altars. Depth of the fact. The most remarkable feature of the Trypillians was their cyclical relationship with space. Every 60 to 80 years, when the fertility of nearby soils was exhausted, they carried out a ritual known as the Great Burning. Residents removed all valuables before setting the entire settlement on fire. Archaeologists have discovered thick layers of burned clay that effectively preserved the everyday life of these ancient people. Their pottery represents the pinnacle of pre-literate art. Intricate spiral ornaments, symbols of infinity, and depictions of the duality of the world, male and female principles, suggest the existence of a complex mythology that may have later influenced Indo-European beliefs. Fact 2. The origins of democracy, the Vesh system and Russkaya Pravda. Kievan Rus was not a classic Eastern despotism. It was a complex federation of principalities where the prince's monarchy was balanced by the institution of the Vesh, a public assembly of free citizens. In Kiev, Novgorod, and Halych, the Vesh held real power. It could invite a prince to rule or show him the road, expel him, if he violated the terms of the agreement. The prince was seen not as a sacred ruler, but as a military leader and supreme arbiter whose authority depended on his ability to protect the community and uphold the law. Depth of the fact. The legal backbone of this society was Russkaya Pravda, created under Yaroslav the Wise in the 11th century. This code was extraordinarily progressive for its time. While much of Europe still practiced ordeals by fire and widespread executions, Russkaya Pravda largely abolished the death penalty, replacing it with a system of monetary fines paid to the victim's family or the prince. This reflected a high value placed on human life and a well-developed institution of private property. The tradition of elected and accountable authority established in Kiev later became the foundation for the Cossack Republic and the modern Ukrainian rejection of authoritarianism. Fact 3. Ostro Academy, an intellectual bridge between East and West. Founded in 1576 by Prince Konstanty Vasil Ostrogsky, the Ostro Academy became the first institution of higher education in the East Slavic world. It emerged as a response to the expansion of Jesuit colleges and the need to defend Orthodox identity. The uniqueness of the academy lay in its synthesis of two educational systems, the Western European model of the 7 liberal arts and the Byzantine tradition of Greek language and theology studies. The finest scholars of the time taught there, and instruction was conducted in 3 languages, Greek, Latin, and Church Slavonic. Depth of the fact. The Academy's greatest achievement was the Ostro Bible 1581, a monumental work produced by pioneer printer Ivan Fedorov. It became the first complete printed edition of the Holy Scriptures in Church Slavonic. To prepare it, scholars compared Greek, Septuagint, Hebrew, and Latin sources, requiring exceptional expertise in textual criticism and linguistics. The Bible became a cultural shield for Ukraine, slowing the denationalization of the elite and transforming Ostro into the Athens of Volhynia. Later, the traditions of Ostro formed the basis of the Kiev-Mohyla Academy, which served as the primary intellectual donor for all of Eastern Europe for 2 centuries. Fact 4. The phenomenon of the Zaporizhian Sich, a military order, and Christian republic. The Zaporizhian Sich, established in the 16th century beyond the rapids of the Dnieper River, was a unique socio-political phenomenon, a classless military republic. In an age of rigid feudalism, complete equality prevailed there. Any man, regardless of origin, whether a runaway peasant or an impoverished nobleman, could become a full-fledged Cossack if he accepted orthodoxy and the rules of the brotherhood. The political system was remarkably transparent. Supreme authority belonged to the General Cossack Council, which elected the hetman and officers annually. Depth of the fact. The Cossacks created one of the most effective military machines of their era. Their fleet of chaikas, light, highly maneuverable boats reinforced with reeds for buoyancy, terrorized Ottoman Istanbul, while their tabor tactics, a defensive formation of wagons chained together, allowed infantry to successfully resist elite cavalry in open terrain. The Sich functioned much like a European knightly order, but with a democratic core. It became a laboratory of personal freedom, shaping the Ukrainian national archetype of a free individual who recognized no master except God and an elected ataman. Fact 5. Pylyp Orlik's Constitution of 1710, the first blueprint of a constitutional state. In 1710, in the city of Bendyeri, after the defeat at the Battle of Poltava, hetman in exile Pylyp Orlik signed a document titled Pacts and Constitutions of the Rights and Freedoms of the Zaporizhian Host. This document is considered one of the world's earliest modern constitutions. Decades before Montesquieu and the American Revolution, Orlik legally established the principle of separation of powers into 3 independent branches. Legislative, the General Council convened 3 times a year, executive, the hetman, and judicial, the General Court. Depth of the fact. Orlik's constitution was deeply rooted in the idea of limiting absolutism. It introduced the concept of the hetman's accountability to the people and separated the state treasury from the ruler's personal funds, a revolutionary step in the early 18th century. The document also protected socially vulnerable groups such as widows, orphans, and poor Cossacks by exempting them from taxes and duties. Although the Constitution never fully came into force due to the occupation of Ukraine, it became a political manifesto, proving that the Ukrainian elite envisioned the country's future within the framework of European constitutional law rather than Eastern autocracy. Fact 6. Ukrainian Baroque, architectural synthesis and cultural renaissance. From the late 17th to the mid-18th century, a unique architectural style emerged in Ukraine known as Cossack or Mazepa Baroque. Unlike Western European Baroque, with its heavy ornamentation and dark monumentality, the Ukrainian version preserved the traditional wooden and stone architecture of Rus, while enriching it with plasticity, dynamism, and multi-tiered, pear-shaped domes. This was a period of cultural explosion, when patron hetmans such as Ivan Mazepa invested enormous resources into restoring ancient churches like St. Sophia Cathedral and the Kiev Petrus Lavra, as well as building new ones. Depth of the fact. Mazepa Baroque became the visual embodiment of Ukraine's ambition to become the cultural leader of the region. During this era, book engraving, Baroque poetry, and musical schools flourished in Kiev and Chernobyl. Composers such as Bortniansky and Vettel later influenced the classical music tradition of all Eastern Europe. The style emphasized Ukraine's connection to the Western world and its aspiration to revive Kiev's former glory as a spiritual center. Even today, Kiev's skyline of golden domes and elegant facades remains a legacy of that great Baroque age. Fact 7. the birthplace of aviation and space trajectories, from Sikorsky to Korolev. Ukraine gave the world key thinkers who helped humanity conquer the skies. In Kiev at the beginning of the 20th century, Igor Sikorsky designed the first multi-engine airplanes, including the legendary Ilya Muromets, and laid the foundations of helicopter engineering. Yuri Kondratyuk from Poltava, whose real name was Oleksandr Sharyai, calculated the trajectory for a flight to the moon in his 1919 book. His concept of a lunar orbit rendezvous, where the main spacecraft remains in orbit while a landing module descends to the surface, was used by NASA 50 years later during the Apollo missions. Depth of the fact. Sergei Korolev from Zhytomyr became the chief designer, who launched the first artificial satellite and sent the first human into space. His genius lay in his ability to unite thousands of engineers to achieve the impossible. Ukraine also remained the technological heart of Soviet and post-Soviet rocketry. The Yuzhmash plant in Dnipro produced some of the world's most reliable launch vehicles, including the Zenit family. Even today, Ukraine is one of the few countries with a complete aerospace production cycle, a direct legacy of this powerful engineering tradition. Fact 8. Mykola Leontovich's Shchedryk, the global cultural code of Christmas. The world's most famous Christmas melody, Carol of the Bells, has deep Ukrainian origins. Composer Mykola Leontovich spent nearly 20 years creating 5 different versions of this small choral piece based on an ancient Ukrainian folk chant known as a Shchedryk. Leontovich employed the principle of musical minimalism. The entire composition is built around the endless repetition of 4 notes, creating a hypnotic and almost magical effect. Depth of the fact. The story of Shchedryk is an example of brilliant cultural diplomacy. In 1919, the government of the Ukrainian People's Republic sent Oleksandr Koshyts's choir on a world tour to promote awareness of the Ukrainian nation through music. In 1921, the song triumphed at Carnegie Hall in New York. In 1936, American composer Peter Wilhoski wrote English lyrics, transforming the ancient pagan chant about a swallow into a Christian hymn of ringing bells. The song became a worldwide hit, yet its musical structure remains a monument to Ukrainian melodicism and folkloric antiquity. Fact 9. The loss of a nuclear arsenal, an unprecedented act of trust. In 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine inherited the world's 3rd largest nuclear arsenal. Its territory contained 176 intercontinental ballistic missiles, more than 2,500 tactical nuclear weapons, and strategic bombers. This arsenal exceeded those of France, Britain, and China combined. In 1994, Ukraine signed the Budapest Memorandum, agreeing to complete nuclear disarmament in exchange for security guarantees from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia. Depth of the fact. This was the first and only case in world history in which a state voluntarily relinquished such a powerful deterrent in the name of global peace and nuclear non-proliferation. Ukraine physically destroyed its missile silos and transferred its warheads. Today, diplomats worldwide analyze this event as a major lesson in international security, raising profound questions about the reliability of security guarantees and the consequences of their violation for the global order. Fact 10. Ascanianova, an ark in the Virgin Steppe. The Ascanianova Biosphere Reserve in the Kherson region is not merely a park, but the only remaining area of untouched feathergrass steppe in Europe that has never been plowed. Founded in 1898 by Friedrich Falls-Fein, it became a unique scientific laboratory. As a passionate naturalist, Falls-Fein created an artificial oasis in the arid steppe with ponds and a dendrological park where animals from different continents, zebras, bison, and antelopes, live in semi-free conditions. Depth of the fact. Ascanianova played a crucial role in saving the Przewalski's horse from extinction. By the mid-20th century, the species had nearly disappeared from the wild in Mongolia. The global population was restored largely from animals preserved in the Ukrainian reserve. Ascanianova stands as a living monument to how private initiative and love for nature can change the ecological fate of the planet. It remains a biosphere benchmark showing what the Earth looked like before large-scale agricultural expansion. Fact 11. The Holodomor of 1932 to 1933, the mechanics of an artificial genocide. The Holodomor in Ukraine was not the result of crop failure, but a planned act of state terror. Soviet authorities used famine as a weapon to suppress national resistance and destroy independent farming communities. A system of blacklists was introduced. Villages that failed to meet impossible grain quotas were completely blockaded by troops. Authorities confiscated not only bread but all food supplies, closed markets, and prohibited people from leaving for the cities. Depth of the fact. According to various estimates, between 4 and 7 million people died within a single year. It was an attempt to break the social backbone of the nation. The Holodomor permanently altered Ukraine's demographic landscape, destroyed centuries-old village traditions, and caused a profound collective trauma. Today, international recognition of the Holodomor as genocide is not merely a political gesture, but an act of historical justice, reminding the world of the catastrophic consequences of totalitarian ideology when state interests are placed above human life. Fact 12. Chernobyl, the disaster that changed the world. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster of April 26, 1986, became the largest technological catastrophe in human history. The radiation release was equivalent to hundreds of Hiroshima bombs. Ukraine bore the brunt of the disaster, while thousands of liquidators risked their lives and health to prevent even greater contamination of Europe by constructing the first sarcophagus under inhuman conditions. Depth of the fact. Chernobyl became a point of no return for the Soviet Union. The authorities' lies about the scale of the disaster during the first days after the explosion, including holding May Day parades in Kiev under radioactive rain, completely undermined public trust in the system. Today, the exclusion zone has become a paradoxical natural laboratory. In the absence of humans, populations of rare species, such as bears, lynxes, and even European bison have recovered. Chernobyl forced the world to reconsider nuclear safety standards and gave powerful momentum to the global environmental movement. Fact 13. The digital state. Ukraine as a leader in IT transformation. Ukraine has made an extraordinary leap from post-Soviet bureaucracy to becoming one of the world's most advanced digital states. The DIA application, The State and Me, made Ukraine the first country where a digital passport on a smartphone holds the same legal status as a physical document. Today, Ukrainians can open businesses, renew driver's licenses, and obtain official certificates in just a few clicks. Depth of the fact. Ukraine's IT sector is not limited to outsourcing. It has also produced globally influential products. Companies such as Grammarly, GitLab, and Preply were founded or co-founded by Ukrainians. During wartime, Ukraine's digital infrastructure demonstrated remarkable resilience, enabling real-time social assistance payments and volunteer coordination. Today, Ukraine exports its GovTech expertise to other countries, becoming a model of 21st century digital democracy. Fact 14. A mosaic of cultures. Crimean Tatar heritage and Bakhchisaraj. The history of Ukraine is inseparably connected with the Crimean Khanate, a state that remained a major geopolitical player in Eastern Europe for more than 3 centuries. Bakhchisaraj was not only the residence, but also an intellectual center where poetry, architecture, and Islamic law flourished. The Crimean Tatars, the indigenous people of Crimea, created a unique culture shaped by the traditions of antiquity, Byzantium, and the East. Depth of the fact. Relations between the Cossacks and the Crimean Tatars are often reduced to warfare, but history also records periods of deep alliance. For example, during the Battle of Konotop in 1659, a united Cossack, Tatar force inflicted a devastating defeat on the Muscovite army. The tragedy of the 1944 deportation became one of the darkest chapters in Crimean Tatar history. Yet their return to Crimea in the 1990s and integration into Ukrainian political life highlights Ukraine's role as a bridge between the Christian and Islamic worlds, where respect for indigenous peoples forms part of the national identity. Fact 15. A horizontal society. The phenomenon of volunteerism and self-organization. Modern Ukraine demonstrates a unique social model to the world. A horizontal society. In critical moments, such as revolutions or wartime, Ukrainian society shows an extraordinary ability to self-organize without orders from above. The volunteer movement in Ukraine functions almost like a parallel state, capable of raising millions of dollars for satellites, purchasing thousands of drones, or organizing nationwide humanitarian logistics within days. Depth of the fact. This phenomenon is rooted in the historical experience of surviving without a stable state of one's own. When government institutions were weak or hostile, Ukrainians relied on horizontal connections, communities, brotherhoods, and Cossack circles. Today, this civic religion makes Ukraine exceptionally resilient. While vertical systems collapse when their center is struck, a horizontal network continues functioning and rebuilding itself anywhere. It is a living example of how modern civil society can assume responsibility for defending and developing a nation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. Write in the comments which country you want to see next, and what facts you're most curious about. See you in the next episode.